Welcome to
Dragons
Unicorns
and other elfy creatures.
I think it's supposed to be creative creatures.
They're very creative, but they look elfy today. You look elfy. Look at your bells.
Hey, you know, the bells are ringing. Oh, and you are who?
I'm Rona Gofstein.
Who are you?
I'm Rona Gofstein. Who are you?
I am the abominable snowman. So, yeah. So, anyway, we are moving into the Christmas season. Miss Hanukkah?
6 minutes after Halloween ended,
no,
we started moving into the Christmas season.
Well, no. That's when the dysfunctional retail world started moving into Halloween. I mean, moved into Christmas.
6 minutes after Halloween was over.
Yeah, I know. It's disgusting. They just
skip
skip over
to
Thanksgiving.
Mourn the holiday, even.
No.
And it's passing.
There is no mourning for Halloween. You get to have all the dead people that show up and talk more than usual, and more people can hear them as usual, and more people think they're crazier than usual. It's all good.
It is all good, but you know, some of us would like Halloween a little more often, and this year was weird too, because here in Massachusetts we had so many power outages that celebrations got moved and trick-or-treating got moved, and
see, I don't think they should move any of it.
well, there were no power, so they moved that.
The veil is thin, and children don't need power. They have candy.
They are power. They're on sugar power.
I was going to say, with all that Halloween candy, they should have just done little gerbil cages for the kids, and they could have like done the lights.
Oh, notorious in schools that the worst behaved day of the school year is usually the day after Halloween.
Yeah.
Best behaved school day? School picture day. Everybody's in their nice clothes.
Everybody's in their nice clothes. Yeah, well, obviously you've never been to a charter school at a nudist camp.
Oh God, that's just too many adjectives to think about. I need more coffee.
So, anyways, well, we are starting our shows into the Christmas season. I think this is going to come out just before Thanksgiving. I try not to go into Christmas mode till after Thanksgiving, but you know, with taping shows, we're not always sure when they're going to drop.
Right, when things are going to air. Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, the Christmas shopping season officially started when Santa came at the end of the Macy's Day Parade.
Yes. Yes.
That was the beginning, supposedly.
And now the Macy's Day Parade would have to be moved up 3 weeks and would be chasing Santa down the street.
I know. It's a little scary, though.
It is a little scary. Yeah.
It's scarier than Halloween.
But well, in a different way. I don't find Halloween all that scary.
No, I don't either. And I think one of the reasons Halloween has gotten so popular, in addition to the fact that it's about candy and things like that, is that there's just not the same kind of pressure. I mean, when was the last time anybody's mother said, sure, you spend Halloween with your in-laws, but when do you come spend it with us? I mean, there's just not that kind of pressure. It's just all about fun and make-believe and creativity.
Wait a second. What's this make-believe crap?
All right, you know what I mean. Well, if you're going to be dressing as Thomas the Tank Engine, it's a little bit about make-believe.
Hey, you know what? I respect, I am politically correct. If you think you're Thomas the Tank, then blow that whistle.
And both of my sons have been that in the past.
Yep. See the steam come right out of their ears. But you know, the one thing nice about, one of the other nice things about Halloween is you can get away with calling your mother-in-law a witch, and you know.
You can, yeah, to her face.
Yeah, to her face.
As opposed to all the times you've said it potentially not to her.
You may say it 10 times more often during the Christmas season behind her back, but that's not one day you can say it to her face and get away with it.
Well, I think it's one of the reasons. I thought, there's a Christmas movie coming out called Bad Moms Christmas, which is the sequel, and actually they reviewed it and they say it's actually maybe even a tiny bit better than the original. The original was okay. The whole concept of, the pressure moms put on themselves and one another, be perfect, do it right. And I think doing it for the Christmas season, which is a time when so many people, and especially women, tend to put so much pressure on themselves to make everything Martha Stewarty or pick your favorite home.
Emily Post.
There you go.
Emily
Adding
Post.
adding the pressure of mom to mom, I thought was a very clever
Now,
idea.
see, now I don't remember by the time I was at least 9 or 10 years old, my mother being under that much pressure, because by that point she was working full time. So the three of us had to clean the house, had to cook the food for the people
No,
coming.
you were
everything.
under the
And-
pressure.
Yeah, no, we were definitely under the pressure. So what do you think? Liz Smith died.
No, I hadn't heard.
Yes, Liz Smith died 90. 90 years
God
old.
love her. Who's going to take her place as the doyen of gossip and juiciness? And
Well, now it's YouTube.
they have
I
taken
mean,
her
let's face it. I
place.
mean, the days of Hedda Hopper and
Yeah.
Luella Parsons, which gave way to, Liz Smith, and in some ways Joan Rivers.
I was going to say Joan Rivers. Yeah,
Joan,
absolutely.
loved Joan. Joan was great.
Well, I hope they all have like their own little Algonquin round table-y type thing up in the ether wherever they are. I would
they're
love
up there. They're up there smoking cigarettes
I
and
hope
sipping
so.
cognac.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, now they're laughing. They're going, now who gets the last laugh? You're still stuck down there. And of course, this is, I mean, who needs to have people uncovering the stars when every other day
That they're-
we hear
sorry.
another star that just uncovered themselves to the wrong person?
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
horrible.
I know.
It's an interesting thing, though, to see all the dominoes start falling.
Well, yeah, and I do want to put this out there because this is Dragons, Unicorns, and Other Creative Creatures, and we're talking about the creative world.
Yeah.
And do I believe that people should misuse power? No. Do I believe we should have sexual predators in the White House? Hasn't stopped it, but no.
Hasn't stopped it. No, but yes.
But yeah, I am somebody who feels like, yes, inappropriate behavior has to be called. The one thing I want to caution people about is because somebody said it does not make it so.
No. You have to wait for there to be
And
proof
there's
and
you need some some more.
corroboration.
Yeah, you need a little bit more evidence. And let's face it, especially, there's you have like the Kevin Spacey thing on one hand, who's going, I didn't really remember, I was drunk and I kind of made you uncomfortable, but there was no actual, like, as far as I can tell, sexual activity happened. I got a little drunk and I kind of sort of got a little too much in your personal space. Is that good? Is that a good thing? No. Am I trying to excuse it? No. Should it ruin the rest of the man's career? I mean, who
Well, more
has no
people
other...
came out with witnesses.
Oh, see, now I haven't heard that about Spacey.
Oh,
I've heard
yes.
it about other people.
No, Richard Dreyfuss's son, and Richard was a witness to it. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, see, now that's news.
Yes,
I
that's been
didn't. I missed
that one's been corroborated. Brett Ratner's been corroborated.
Now, wait a second. So Kevin Spacey's was corroborated by Richard Dreyfuss's son?
Kevin Spacey, Richard Dreyfuss's son is one of his victims, and it was
Oh.
corroborated by Dreyfuss's
Okay, well,
son.
now we're talking about a different story.
Yep.
And, of course, it's...
Your Wonder Woman has said she's not doing the next movie if Brett Ratner has anything to do with it, because the stories against him have been corroborated.
Now, Brett Ratner was what?
Producer, one of the producers, and he did all the original X-Men movies.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was a little out of that loop. So,
yeah, it's like this house of cards that's just falling
Which is
on these
probably now not going to get renewed. Speaking
Oh no,
of
it's
which.
done. It
No,
was
it's
already
done.
on its. It was already tentative to its last season, and
Yeah.
it's already been canceled. It's
Yeah,
officially canceled.
it's been rolled up.
Yep, Louis
Well-
C.K.'s movie's not being released. There's a couple of things that are changing rapidly in that creative
Now,
world.
of course, if you're, a racist, bigoted judge running for Senate in Alabama, it's okay.
Oh well, yeah. Let's not go into political creatures.
Okay. So, well, I wore this intentionally because of our guest today.
Yay!
And it's my crossover for Christmas to Halloween, the
I love
Abominable Snowman.
that it looks like it's like the ugly Christmas sweater background.
And and I think we should talk about horrors going on in real life into the horrors that go on in the mind of Trisha J. Wooldridge. She writes grown-up horror, short stories, and weird poetry.
It's right up your alley.
Some even winning awards. Now, I don't know if it's the grown-up horror short stories that win the awards, the weird poetry, or both.
Yes.
Is
all
it
of the above.
all the above? Okay. So she won the Weird Al
No,
Award?
not that weird.
Oh, okay, okay.
Different weird.
Her recent publications include stories and poems in gothic fantasy and supernatural horror, short stories. Okay. Dark Luminous Wings.
Very subtle.
And Wicked Haunted. I can't reach
Over
that
that
one.
way.
That's on the other side of the Scary Snowman.
That's going to look interesting.
Look at the printing.
Which came out this past October with New England Horror Writers, which is better than New England Horrible Writers.
Oh, no, yes, absolutely.
When she writes as a child-friendly T.J. Wooldridge, she's published 3 scary children's novels and a poem in the Jimmy Fund charity anthology, Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep.
Speaking of dominoes.
Look. It was so horrifying that the snowman tried to run away and hide behind the unicorn.
Aw, poor snowman.
She's the past president of Broad Universe, a universe which celebrates broads, I take it.
Yep.
Pretty much.
TJ!
Hey,
Trisha!
thank
How
you
are
guys.
you?
Great. Thank you guys for having me on the show.
Oh, we're thrilled.
Yeah.
Tricia and I actually met through Broad Universe.
Yes.
She was president at the time. Broad Universe is this awesome organization that supports and encourages and promotes women in speculative fiction.
Yes.
So it
It
is
is.
about broads.
It
It
is.
is.
A universe
And it is.
of-
It's meant to be a pun.
It is meant to be a pun. In fact, the board of directors is known as the Mother Board.
The motherboard.
And Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, do we use her married name? Or
Yes.
just, Mary
Yeah.
Wollstonecraft Shelley is our matron saint.
Yes.
Oh, well, and hey, and that's quite the same.
She's
Oh,
awesome.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She was a great writer.
She was.
Well, I laugh because one of my favorite cousins, she actually took care of me when I was a baby. She still tells stories about changing my diapers.
Lucky
And
you.
Which means she was like, she's in her 70s now. She was at my wedding reception. She was the one dancing on the floor, the redhead in the jeans.
Oh.
Yeah, you would have thought was in her 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's in her mid 70s.
Nice.
And she's an original. I tell her right to her face, she's a broad.
Yeah.
She is?
She's
Yeah,
got
glad we
the
are.
Yeah.
big heart, and she
Yeah, that's us.
talks tough, and she does what she wants, and she danced around that dance floor all by herself.
Yeah.
So
You should have seen us at ReaderCon. I was all gothed out. It was like 90s night, so I was totally in my complete goth gear. I had like the floofy morning veil, my Neil Gaiman's death outfit with like the black tank top, the little curly Q.
I love it when you do your eyes with the
Yeah.
cues.
So I'm all about dancing and being a broad.
We did. Well, while you were
Yeah.
president, while she was president of Broad Universe, we had the zombie prom.
Yes, we did.
At
We
Arisha.
did. Yeah.
That was it was great because you could buy the most horrible prom dresses from any
Yes.
thrift store, like
Yup.
those awful greens or the cover.
And then destroy them.
and then just cover
It was
them with
wonderful. And I did all the
blood
makeup for that too.
did. It was
That's so much fun.
now, can I come to an event if I dress up like Vera Charles?
Oh
Yes.
God, yeah.
Come on, now
absolutely.
she was
Yeah.
definitely a
Yes.
broad on Broadway.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about, okay, so we have Dark Luminous Wings. Now that's a collection of, tell us about
It's
that
an
book.
anthology. So Dark Luminous Wings is put out by Pole to Pole Publishing. They do dark fantasy, which is kind of where I fall. And this is their third anthology. And it's the first one that I got accepted into. So I was really thrilled with this one. And the theme of it is dark luminous wings. So you needed to have a creature or a being or something that had wings. And again, it was going for a little bit dark, but also a little bit whimsical. So the story that I have in there is actually called Cemetery Angels. It's based on a real place. It's based on St. Stanislaus Cemetery in Holyoke, Massachusetts. It's the Polish Catholic cemetery, which means you get all the really cool, creepy angel statues
Oh, yeah.
and all that.
And they're worn too, aren't they? They
Yes.
would be after so much time.
And it's also based on, I don't remember if it was an actual news story or an urban legend. Either way, it's a story and it matters. Where when I was a kid growing up, I heard about people going to the cemetery to pay their respects. And you didn't lock your doors in the cemetery because you didn't worry about that because you're at the cemetery. But there was a string of robberies of people breaking into cars to steal stuff while you were at the gravestones. And my mom, who was always a very cautious person, I was always raised to, be wary. The world is an awful place. Be careful. And she's correct.
It does
so
have
we
its
locked our
moments.
doors, and we were one of the people that still locked our doors, even in the cemetery. When my dad passed away some years back, we went to go pay our respects because he's also in that cemetery. And I was about to lock the doors, and she turns around and is like, "Why'd you lock the doors?" And I'm like, "Who are you, and what did you do with my mother?"
It's the grief.
So-
It's the grief talking.
Yeah, and so that just all that clicked, and the statuary clicked, and the story is based on that urban legend of someone coming in, and what happens when it's just a widow and her daughter going to go see. And I like writing through children's voices because I think children are more honest, but also children are very scary because they know the world is a scary place.
They do.
And so I had the statues respond when they were in danger.
I like that.
Interesting.
I
And-
like the way it came about. You had their call.
Yes.
You had their submission call, which required A, B, and C, and then you had your experience, an urban legend,
Yeah.
A place, and how that all wove together
Yeah.
to become the story that they.
And I'm in a lot of anthologies. I love anthology calls. I love just that little extra, that's like the spark, because I listen when I go everywhere. I'm always paying attention. I love urban legends. I read everything. I love fairy tales and myths. And so they're all like in my head, swimming around, demanding attention. And then when I see an anthology call, all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, that goes with that, oh, that can do that thing. And then I puke out a story and then polish it.
She polishes the puke.
I understand. When
We do understand, yes.
I
All
do
you
that-
writers out there understand,
Yeah.
and if you ever
Yep.
thought about writing, it's part of the process, yes.
Yep. Well, and it's so funny because I sometimes not refer to my writing that way, though I could. But when people say, well, tell me about your psychic readings, I was like, well, I do psychic vomit. I open my mouth and it goes blah, and then we kind of push it around and make sense out of it.
So I do tarot, and that's almost exactly what I do too.
I know we talked about that.
I knew you
It's
guys
like, and
would
I'm like blah 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 blah. And when I
Yep.
teach tarot, it's like, oh, just keep talking. It's gonna come out.
It's just going to come out. So now, have you ever been up to Bucksport, Maine? Are you familiar with that urban legend?
No.
Well, you have to check out that
Okay.
urban legend.
All right.
Why?
Okay.
What happened in Bucksport, Maine?
Well, there was a judge that sentenced a woman to be a witch and killed her, and then after he died, on his gravestone showed up a carved witch's leg.
Ooh.
The
Oh yeah, that would turn into about several stories for you.
Yeah.
And I went up there when I was probably like 10 years old, and they've replaced the gravestone, I haven't been there in years, but they replaced the gravestone 4 or 5 times, and every time it comes back in, because when she was dying, she cursed him. And so there's this whole thing, and if you go up there, they've now protected the actual gravestone of the judge, but the witch's leg is still there, and they've recorded the
wow.
histories of when they've like taken it out and stuff like that. And so I was like 10 when we went up there when we saw the witch's leg, and of course I went home and I was all freaked out and
Because children,
very
the world is scary.
and a very psychic child, so I'm
Yeah.
picking up on stuff, stuff like this. So my brother sneaks into the room.
Oh no, this is not
My
going
older
to end
brother
well.
sneaks into the room, and he has something, and he turns the light off, and he's just finished his model, which is a glow-in-the-dark Phantom of the Opera, and does this to me, and I got hysterical.
It's amazing some of our siblings survived, that we didn't
Yeah.
kill them. And, although we become writers, who knows, they may end up
Yeah.
dead in our stories.
Well, both my brothers are dead, so
Sorry about that.
at the end of it, it all worked out.
Okay,
Now
moving
I-
right along to more dead things.
So
now
tell
I
me-
made me down to sleep. That is I've always,
Yeah.
as somebody who was raised in the Jewish faith, this is not a prayer we ever use. And the first
Right.
time I heard it, I was like, ah,
It's creepy. It's a creepy prayer.
creepy prayer.
So Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep is a charity anthology. So
That's
everyone
awesome.
who was accepted into it, this is a donation we made. And it started at a convention called NECON, the Northeastern Writers Convention. And sadly, the horror community has lost several family members
Yes.
to cancer. And one of the members of the community there, his son was actually, his life was saved because he was misdiagnosed with cancer.
Oh my gosh, that's
And they
unusual.
went to the Dana-Farber Institute, like, nope, your son does not have cancer. It's just this, this, and this. And they treated it.
Woohoo.
So it's like one of those, like, happy, oh,
Yay.
yes. But it was terrifying. I mean,
Oh yeah.
to know that. So because, and not just the son there, but many of our community have worked with Dana-Farber Institute, Jimmy Fund. So we wanted to give back to them.
That's awesome.
And that's why we did the Now I Lay Me Down. So it is, the stories in there are all child friendly. And I put my poem in there as Trisha Wooldridge. It started with a NaNoWriMo project. I don't know if you're familiar with NaNoWriMo.
National Novel Writing Month, the
Yes.
insanity
Yeah.
we're in the midst of.
So last year, my NaNoWriMo project was based on this weird idea that I got in my head about a circus that's under the bed. And like when you have a nightmare and you're like, oh, a little figment pops out of your head and goes under your bed. And if it's lucky, there's a community of other little dream figments, and they travel from under the bed to under the bed to under the bed. And there's rules.
I'm not
on-
sleeping tonight.
Yeah.
They're friendly.
Okay.
And
It's child friendly. You're all set.
yes. Unless they're by themselves and they don't have a family to love them. That's where the monsters under the bed come from. But if they have a family to love them. So I meant to do it all prose, and my brain's like, ha ha ha, let's make your life more difficult. So
course.
it gave me poems between each chapter and an opening poem that gives the background of what the circus under the bed is. And then, like, I have another poem that's the rules for the circus under the bed, because the plot, of course, means you're going to have to break some of these rules.
Well,
and there's going to be interaction with children
And trouble, yes.
and all sorts of trouble. But the poem, the opening poem, I really liked, and I felt it fit with this particular anthology because it's overall a poem of hope and a poem of positivity and love. And I mean, pray there's a circus under your bed. You want you want happiness
I want a
and
circus
love.
under my bed. That would be fun.
So yeah.
Now she actually volunteered to read
Oh
the poem.
yes. So the circus under the bed. What was that noise there neath your bed? Some whisper-hissed song now long fled? A skittering whirl of legsy clacked dread? Something real you feel, not just in your head. Sleep on, it's only the circus under your bed. Woke with a start, felt your heart stop? Asleep and a dream and then not. That special moment from your special head, a figment was born, burst forth with a pop. And who with luck found a circus under your bed? Once when the world was ever dark, fire was magic, dangerous spark. Nightmares were real, not just under the bed. Monster or mere shadow, there was no mark if a figment were friend or if on babes it fed. Fear weaves dark spells, whispers and hate. Figments and dreamers forged sad fate. Monsters from figments grew up neath the bed, and believing the fear did truth create, that dreamers' very gaze could kill figments dead. Dreamers make lies true and spoken, monsters simply childhood's token. Still children fear monsters under the bed, and figments fear each dreamer awoken. Life hangs in the balance during checks neath the bed. Child dreamers are told nothing's there. Child figments are told always beware. Do not ask questions, obey rules instead. Fear lives and grows under the guise of care, making monsters of the circus under the bed. What dreamers forgot but is true, figments do not mean to hurt you. Figments have families, some even wed. They dance and play, that's what circuses do. Figments live just like us, only under the bed. Circuses are all over Earth. Any dreamer's dream can give birth. Each new figment knows to hide neath the bed and hope for a circus's protective mirth, to love them and keep them safe there under the bed. While circuses mean dreamers no harm, should a figment find no circus warm? Cold and afraid, they do change in their dread. Loneliness works a most horrible charm. The figment becomes the monster under the bed. So when from good dreams you might stray, startle wake far from the light of day, don't fear the noises you hear neath your bed. With love, and to whomever you pray, please ask that a circus is under your bed.
Oh my God, I love it.
Thank
Hold on a
you.
second. Wait, keep your, wait, I didn't
Oh,
find it again.
sorry.
No, there was a line in there particular. Thank goodness, you're a W. Do they always put you at the back?
197. Nope.
Pardon me, everybody. I don't have reading glasses. Keep talking, everybody. There was
Keep
Yeah,
talking.
so I had that little story, and I've always been a very lucid dreamer. So I've wanted to do more with dreams. One of my favorite inspirations is Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. So just playing with the idea of the dreams being real and how they can interact is always been.
this line: "Fear lives and grows under the guise of care." That one just.
I also wrote this last November, so there's a little bit about obeying rules and yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it's very
you know,
it-like, the concept that, it seems like we're caring and someone's being caring and they're not.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I always I follow all the rules. I agree with.
And, yeah, and I can't remember if it was Monroe or Catherine Hepburn ones. If I obeyed all the rules, I would have missed all the fun.
Yeah.
One of them said one thing and one of them said something really similar, so I can't remember which.
One of the fun parts of being a writer is finding out how, especially with anthology calls, where they'll say, do this, this, and this. And I'm like, okay, how can I kind of bend the rules but still follow the rules?
How far can I bend them? We've done anthologies together. One you
Yes.
edited, one I edited, and
Yes.
you went against. You bent against our length rule.
Yes,
That
I
was it.
did, and that was such a hard.
We couldn't
that's
cut
still
it
one of my
either.
now. That's one of my favorite ones that I've written actually.
Trish wrote for the Once Upon an Apocalypse anthology, and she zombified The Steadfast Tin Soldier by Hans Christian Andersen, and she did it in an epistolary letters between the soldier and the girl he left back home. And she's like, cut it down if you need it. I totally get that. And Scott Goudsward, who was my co-editor on it, we read it like twice, 3 times each, and went, yeah, we'll just be the last story in the book. We can't cut it. We'll just end with a big long one. Leave it there.
It still is one of my favorite ones. That was the one where I was sitting at Panera Bread during our one of the write-ins for one of the groups in Worcester, and I got my tears pouring down my face. I'm like, I'm okay. I promise I'm okay.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
So
Yeah.
sometimes you are crying for your characters.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you ever cry for your characters?
Yes, I have. I mean, I haven't harmed them quite as badly as Trish occasionally has harmed her characters.
Yeah.
Well,
But
she
yeah,
does
I've
write
had-
horror. You write
I
romance,
do,
so we're
I
kind
do.
of.
Yeah.
Not a lot of shanking and death and stuff like. But I have had characters who've gone through massive emotional breakthroughs or breakdowns or things like that. So yeah, I definitely have.
Broken hearts hurt.
They do.
Yeah.
So now let me ask you this question. When you go back and read it, and edit it and read it and go through this process where you're ready to divorce your child, okay,
Send it off to college.
and you send it
Go
off to
away.
college, get done. Do you ever go back and read it and it still makes you cry?
Yes, especially the scene in the one on the submarine. The line is 2 gunshots, 2 thuds, and I was like, that's still
That
like,
was it. Yeah.
yeah. So that one still does.
Yeah. Her versions of the Steadfast Tin Soldier is still sad and miserable. in
Oh
the
yeah,
end.
it's Hans
I
Christian
redid it.
Andersen. It's depressing.
All of his stuff is depressing, but I've rewritten it with a happier
Yeah.
version. I did turn it into a
So
romance.
yeah, I did that. And yeah, for if I have done something, I usually do still cry over them, and yeah, and laugh at the funny parts. Like,
So do I.
Yeah.
If
It's
I
good.
I
I
go
mean,
back,
it's-
I'll go back to something I wrote years ago, and I'll look at it, and it can still make me cry. It can still make me laugh.
Yeah.
And sometimes people go, you laugh more at your own jokes than anybody I know, and I go, yeah, but I'm the only one that it counts, so I don't care. If you laugh, well, great for you. You got it. If you
Right,
didn't,
or it went through your filter and became
Right.
funny.
I don't. Yeah.
yeah, well, you write for yourself above anything else. If you're writing, you're following your heart. You're doing
hopefully, yes.
Hopefully. And I love writing 2 anthologies and stuff like that, but the story's already there.
Yes.
It just needed that little snap, that spark. So when I do a story, I'm writing it, if I'm not crying about it, then it's probably not sad enough. I need to push it further. If I'm not creeped out, because I normally write between like 10 and 2 in the morning. 10 at
That's a
night
good
to
time to get yourself creeped out.
And I'm like, oh.
The witching hour.
Yeah.
I have a book of poetry called Tales Told at Midnight.
So I do cry. And then Wicked Haunted, which I was going to bring up too, that one is one of the most difficult ones that I've written.
Why?
Okay, so it's a 5,000 word, rhymed and metered story poem.
Oh my God. Let's add
That in and
challenge
of itself,
ourselves,
that in and
boys
of
and
itself
girls.
is bad enough. But the story behind it, I came up with. So I lost a good friend, Phoebe Ray, one of the founders of Broad Universe, had dementia, Alzheimer's, and my mother-in-law did as well. And I was very close to both of them, and watching them go through the system, through nursing homes, and there was a few things Phoebe said, because she was also a writer, that worked their way into that. But there's this thing when you're looking in their eyes and they don't recognize you, and it's not them behind those eyes.
Yep.
So I wanted a story behind that. So a lot of writers deal with tough emotions by writing them out.
Yes.
So I had to obviously make it even harder on myself by doing the rhyme and meter, but it's a story of dealing with dementia and the ghosts and not being able to trust the system.
Yep.
So I threw in, of course, actual ghosts and occult psychiatry.
Occult psychiatry. But sometimes we need a format that's almost that hard in order to deal with an emotion that's also that hard. And I wish I could tell you the name of the book, and I will find it out, and I'll see if we can post it beneath the video. But there was a woman who wrote about a terrible tragedy, and she also wrote about it in poetry. It was the only way she could deal with it. And the final poem of the book, you want to hear challenging, is the first word of every poem that preceded it.
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
Wow.
There you go.
Yeah. So all the poems lead up to this one final poem, and it was over. She needed to get it out of her system, as many creatives do. And it's one of the reasons we create. It's one of the things that inspires us, are the emotions we're going through. And it was such a hard emotion. It needed to be a hard process.
Yeah.
Apparently for her as well.
One of the pieces which I still, if I am reading it at a poetry or whatever, sharing it, is one of the last poems I ever wrote for my father. And the whole poem was, "Papa, where have you gone?" And, and dealing with the failing mind, and that's not and I know he's in there, and I still can't read it without tears rolling down my eyes by the time I finish. He's been dead 10 years now. But still, it's like, I can't read that without getting emotional.
I want to say with poetry in particular, so, because I do short form, fiction, novella, poetry, and novel. Poetry is always the hardest emotions for me. And I think in my head, being able to work with the extra form of poetry, that extra layer of the form of a poem, helps me deal with it better because it hurts so much. So I'm able to manipulate it more and handle it, to try and knead it and put it through my system. Does that make sense?
Well, it's more like cutting yourself with a scalpel than having the whole thing blow up onto your chest.
There is a precision about, there is, joking, there is a precision about poetry that's in an exacting that's.
Yeah, and I think when you're dealing with heavy emotions, because for me, the main purpose, I do have stories, almost all of my poems have a story to them, but the driving factor is how I want you to feel with that poem. And when you play with that, the word choice, the sentence length, whether or not you use punctuation, what type of punctuation.
Oh, yes.
Makes such a difference, and that's a way for me to be like, okay, I can work with this.
That's true. I hadn't thought about it, because the reader is going to get carried through. You've done it for one reason, to put these emotions, on the page and out there, and the reader is going to take that and process it through that format, as opposed to long narrative, lots of words, tons of adjectives.
Yeah.
I've
It's an interesting.
worked with a couple up-and-coming poets and taught poetry. And one of the first things is that, of course, the initial is always, you have to remember, it was written to be read. So you've got to hear it
Yes.
before you can do anything, and you can never hear it when you're speaking it. Somebody else at some point has to speak it for you to hear it
Yes.
and
That's
a
have
good
that
point.
experience so that you can kind of do this. And then the second criteria is, it is successful if somebody felt something, even if it wasn't what you
Yes,
felt.
yes. I totally agree with that.
Absolutely.
One of my writers groups, we actually do read aloud and we trade off.
Yes.
And that's one of the big things. It's not what I intended for you to feel, but I'm watching them react. I'm like, but that's good. It made you feel a
Right.
thing, and that's what you needed to feel at that point.
Absolutely. When I ran a poetry club in Seattle, Washington, and once a month we'd have anywhere from 30 to 45 people show up, and we'd do like wine and cheese, and the only requirement is that you had to bring an original poem. You couldn't bring somebody else's poem to read. And if you were a poet and you didn't want to read your poetry, me and a couple of other people would just give it to us, we'll read it for you so you can have the experience of hearing it. And it was always so powerful for somebody that was sitting there, because you write poetry doesn't mean you know how to read it.
right.
Oh,
Doesn't
no,
mean you
we've
know how to
had writers
perform
who
it.
can't do, who
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
read their own work, absolutely.
The whole performance thing, you know, it
They
was,
sit there like this and they just read it. Yeah.
well, and I'm gonna give away a secret right now, which is when just before the show started, Trisha had said something about wanting to, had brought a poem to read, and I read through the poem, and I almost told her, "Do you mind if I read the poem?"
Okay, yeah.
Because I was like, oh, I like this. This could really do. And I said, okay, we're going to ask her. Well, maybe we'll have her do it afterwards. And then if for some reason, because I'm thinking, does she know how to read her poetry? Because I have no experience with
yeah,
you.
yeah, that could
And
be.
so
Right.
after listening to enough of this was why I handed you the book. I
All
was
right,
like, okay, yeah.
cool.
Yep,
Thank
yep.
you.
She can read
Yeah.
the poetry, yeah.
But I don't know. I've never heard her. And I was like,
Right.
the worst thing in the world will be is she goes to read her poem and she goes, and blah, 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 blah.
Where we
Yeah.
literally hide behind our words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are writers who do that.
There are.
It can be very daunting. I mean, there's so many ways as artists that we share our work.
Right.
Just by submitting, just by being published, just by
Yeah.
putting it out there to sell and having people buy it. But to also then sometimes speak it as
Yeah.
yet another way that we sometimes are asked to put our work out there.
Well,
And
one of
it
the
is
things we
daunting
did
for
with
some.
Broad Universe is we do our rapid fire readings.
We do.
So at conventions and
Timed.
conferences, you have usually between 5 and 6, sometimes 4
Sometimes.
and 7,
Depends on how
to
popular.
actually pick a piece that will have impact in that time.
Yep.
And I've been very, very fortunate. So Phoebe Ray, who I mentioned, and Anna Arthan, who's another member, have taken time with me. And there was a poem I read at ReaderCon. It was like my second time going. And I was staying with Anana. And no lie, we stayed up for 3 hours while because she has a theater background. And she's going, no, more punch here. No, pull back there. And it was really just an amazing experience to have someone do directing me
Yeah.
how to read a
Absolutely.
poem. And it's a wonderful thing to do that and learning how to time yourself. It was one of the things I tell, because I also did a podcast for Broad Universe where we did readings. And I would give a few tips, like if you're reading prose, and this came from Anana, aim for 110 words in a minute.
Yep.
So like giving people parameters to
Yep.
do that, especially if you're not thinking about that, it allows you to kind of divorce yourself a little bit from it so you can look at it as a separate thing. But I love like going over those things to learn how to read and get the practice reading as well.
It's so good. Like I said, when I did some work with poets, both who ended up getting a collection of poetry out, I said, I'm now going to read it as you wrote it. And they'd be like, oh, no. And I was like, well, where? Where do you want me to stop? Well, then why isn't there punctuation there? Because if there's no punctuation,
Right, you don't know.
and they all wanted to be E.B. White, and they all wanted to.
Cummings, and so no punctuation
yeah.
and no
Yeah,
capitals and
no.
no nothing.
And so it's this, and it's this. I'm gonna, because if this poem ever makes a stage, whoever is reading it, if it's not you, and it's likely
Right.
somebody else will read it, they're going to read it like you wrote it.
Yep.
See, now I used to practice, because I did theater a long time ago, doing some of my favorite monologues. And so when you read a poem, you kind of get into the character. Like when I was looking at that poem of yours, I was going, okay, yeah, I got this character. Now, have you ever done I don't know that there's an official name for it. It's something that I've done a couple of times, but where somebody gives you something, you have like 5 minutes.
Yes.
And you have to
Oh,
create the
like
poem.
Improv
Yes, I
Improv
love
poetry.
That. Yes.
Yes, that's a good one. Improv
That
poetry.
is so much fun.
I love improv. Now, see, now we
That
should
would
do
be
that on the show sometime.
We should.
Yeah,
It would also
improv
make a
poetry.
fun conference
Yes,
workshop.
it would. I might pitch that. I
We should
don't know if I
pitch
know enough to like run it.
Oh,
but
we
let's
could
see if we can
run
ask
it.
some of the poets to do.
We could find people, and if we don't know, we could find people to run it.
So time is moving. So
Oh,
we want to
okay.
talk about Gothic supernatural
Oh, yes.
horror
Oh,
short
Oh my God,
stories.
that cover! I mean, it's worth it to be in the book just for being in the book with
So
that kind of cover.
so Flame Tree Press is this whole series, and they all are that gorgeous. I have 2 other stories that I've got my fingers crossed that they'll take. Yeah.
Across them.
So I'm the last one in that one because they did go alphabetically.
I noticed that. I'm like, where's Trish? Where's Trish? I'm like, oh, all the way at the end.
So that story is one of my more disturbing stories. That is
read
my
the
not for
opening.
not for children. It's my not for children story. Definitely not for children. And it is so that story came about when I was dealing with a friend, family member who has a borderline personality disorder.
Oh.
And we had a very, very difficult, it was a very painful situation.
Yeah.
Because I had put a lot into it and didn't realize that I was being manipulated and used.
And yet that's part of the disease. And
It's very much, and so you don't want to, and so
Right.
So I dealt with that by putting death themselves, because I have a non-gendered death,
Yes, I noticed that.
in a situation with someone who has borderline personality disorder symptoms, who uses suicide as a means for a booty call with death every so often.
She misses him.
I love it. I love it. I think it's great. Manipulation is the name of the piece.
Yeah.
I like your, I actually, I have to say, one of my favorite writers is actually Laurel K. Hamilton.
Yeah.
I'm a big Anita Blake
I like Andrew Blake.
and
Mercy Thompson? Mercy-
Meredith Gentry.
Meredith
Yeah.
Gentry, that's it.
The fairies are good, but the vampire slayer stuff is
Yeah.
really
Necromancer slash
necromancers and stuff like this.
werewolf slash.
But
Was it Were Leopard or Were Tiger in there? at
There's
some point?
a
Where-
where
where-
it was the
there's a
first
where
time
everything.
I actually
Yeah.
came across things other than the
Werewolf.
traditional shifters.
Yeah.
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 It was like a were swan at one
now,
point.
I
even.
like this better.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
than the bio we read.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trisha J. Wooldridge from Auburn, Massachusetts in the U.S. writes short stories, novellas, novels, magazine articles, and poetry about badass fairies, carnivorous horses, social just witches, tarot cards, vengeful spirits, and mundane stuff like food, hay-eating horses, social justice debates, Gothic bands, writer's advice, and alcoholic spirits.
That's right. You do food because you've
Yeah,
done
I
that
do.
for Aresia. Because we
Yeah.
talked about, when you create a world, one of the things that's so true in
Is
ours.
food and how
Food
you
and
get your
celebration.
Food. Yes.
Food celebration and how it's acquired. And she did this whole great, it was
Yeah,
awesome.
I know you've heard this before, but when I did my first science fiction book, and I had to create the world, I did 100 pages before I wrote the first page on
Oh,
the world.
yes,
You have to do
absolutely.
this. People don't get. You have to have the whole world created before you can
and
start
you
writing
don't
in
want
it.
to read that.
What are their
part.
faiths? And it's
Where they
not all
come
one faith for an entire world.
No, what are their curses?
Where they're cursed, yes. What do
if-
they consider profane? If they are a
Ours
society,
are all related to sex.
and if they're in a sex-positive world, they're not going to be using sex as a profanity.
Yeah.
What would they use?
Yeah.
So yeah, and then food, what they eat, why they eat, and then if you play with that, so I love world building. That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, world building is great.
So
you
she
get
does. And so I
completely
love
lost.
the combination of
Yeah.
Yeah.
of the badass fairies and the mundane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I really
But what's
like.
really neat about this is, did you look at the whole table of contents? She's in there with like Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft and
Now, who's
and then
chi-
current
now-
people like Lucy Snyder and there were a couple
Right.
of others I recognized who I know are.
Yeah, well, I'd heard you say that before, but that there's interesting. So it's
And it's neat because in the
a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah.
exactly, and in the back they tell you when the stories came, where they came
Right.
from, or they put, and that
Yeah.
one yours says it started as Flash
It did. It was actually a flash piece, and
fiction,
the-
Flash fiction.
So it was under 1,000 words.
this is a family friendly.
And yeah, so it was under 1,000 words, and it actually first got published in Circlet Presses, who's an erotica
Yeah.
publisher, Halloween shorts. And then one of the
Then you took the
feedbacks-
shorts off?
For them always.
And one of the feedback that I'd gotten from people on an earlier draft was they wanted more about Imogene, the main point of view character. And so I delved more into her background, why she was, like where she came from and all of that.
Okay. We are winding down.
Okay.
Trisha, you going to come back and play sometime with us?
I would love to. I would
Maybe
very much love to.
maybe do improv poetry
yeah.
or some other
All right.
stuff?
Yes.
There's a National Poetry Month. We'll figure out when it is.
Oh, yeah,
We'll make
April.
it happen.
April. Yep.
That
It's
was
my
easy.
birthday month too.
We want to thank
March, then we'll film and we'll get it up for International Poetry Month.
we want to thank Trisha Wooldridge, who has just a whole bunch of stuff out there. You know where her website is. You know how to contact her. You can go back and watch the show and see some of the book covers. If horror is something that you would like to get other than at the 6 o'clock news when you hear the latest tweet storm, we suggest Trisha. Namaste.